The light shineth in darkness, and darkness comprehendeth it not. I used to find this quote quite confusing. Surely if the light's shining in the darkness is squashed, but I now obviously understand from an esoteric point of view that this is about how the light of the divine source, let's say between the good and the bad forces, the good light can shine into the dark, but the darkness can turn away from it. Or it could have that light shine upon it and still not understand it, still not understand what the light is, because that darkness is so thick, so stuck in its way, so, well, full of darkness. And I see now how many people are shown the light path, but they don't understand it, and many of them see it as woo-woo, and think it's crazy people that follow that kind of path. And we have to remember we live in a world that's now trying to tell us that rationalism is the way forward, and that they will try and tell us that religion, spirituality, having a faith, belief in things that are sort of beyond science and such like, they're going to try and tell us that that's all woo-woo, and that's for people that are a bit crazy, or people that don't fit in with the norm, and people that don't want to look further than what a spiritual life is, or want to be stuck in a rational way, is because they're looking for a security in life. And this is why we have sheep and people follow each other, because if that person's doing it, it must be all right, and I'll be all right if I follow what they're doing. You know, they're keeping up with the Joneses type of people. Where people on more spiritual, esoteric paths that go deep into this, not just shallow people, they want to be themselves, they want to be individuals, they want to blaze their own path, they want to go forward as their own star, which is why people like Gurdjieff tell us we should be finding our true I, our essence, the real you inside you, the real I inside me, so that we can be the best person possible. And one of these things that people have been discussing with me lately is wish, to wish, having a wish. In wish one puts one's will, is what Gurdjieff was discussing. But is a wish just a hope that something may or may not happen? Having a wish, or does that put one's will into making it happen, if we wish enough? Are we looking for faith in ourselves, faith in a wish, faith in the divine? And I suppose with faith, when you have faith in something, you are in it, you have faith in it. But when you have a belief, you have acceptance. You accept what is happening to you, you accept what you believe in. And I wonder if people lack faith because they don't feel they're part of life, or they're not in it, or they're not connected to maybe something divine. And then of course they wouldn't have a belief because they don't accept that kind of thing. Living in this rational world, it's very difficult to have a faith because too many people, from a rational point of view, want to make it out that it's stupid, foolish to do such things. But in the past, when we had ancient mysteries and ancient schools, they would have initiates, and then there's this debate as to whether initiates were picked, chosen, or were they just taken there by, perhaps parents that could no longer afford to feed that extra child. Do you feel like you've been chosen? Are you an initiate, but you're being held back by this secular materialistic world? This is why I like the Gurdjieff work, because it's talking about still being able to live in this world and still continue on your spiritual path, or your soul discovering path. I think it's very important to strive for spirituality, strive for soul growth. Yet at the same time, we have to do it one step at a time. And be aware of where one places one's foot. We can easily be misled. We can easily take a misstep. We can easily fall backwards. But at the same time, if we can continue in our faith and belief in ourselves and in whatever faith or belief you're following, you should be going forwards at some point. But we're also part of a world that's full of many other people. And all these people live in their own world. And sometimes these people forget that other people's worlds are going on outside their own. And we have to keep a remembrance on that, reminding ourselves of that when we're following these kinds of paths, that not everybody wants to follow this kind of path. That's fine. We're not here to preach and convert. But we can be aware of why some people don't want to follow that kind of path or are not interested in developing their spirituality. They just want to live safe and secure in their own little world. But one of the main problems, I think, with this world and humanity is that too many people do live in their own world and seem unaware that other people's worlds are going on around and outside them. It was proposed to me earlier today by somebody else that sometimes one feels guilty being on a spiritual path. You feel bad for those being left behind, those that are not following a spiritual path. And I do understand that. I used to want to save the world and wake everybody up. But the most important thing really is to stick to your own path and wake yourself up and develop yourself, and then you can be representative of that kind of work. You can be the shining light that others can look to and maybe inspire them to follow their own spiritual and soulful path. We have to also remember that the dark forces want to disempower people like ourselves, make us feel worthless, so we do end up having our dark nights of the soul and wondering, why am I doing this? Is this worthy? Am I worthy? But I do find it interesting that not just me, but others, like the guy I was talking to today, sometimes feel guilty doing this kind of work when others are not into this kind of spiritual path working. And they instead kind of ridicule me for doing that kind of work. But I wonder if deep down they do want to follow their own spiritual soul path, but they're being held back by having to maintain a rational outlook and follow the sheep of people that see it's all just a materialistic, secular world, and that any kind of spirituality and soul development or believing in a God or a divine source and such like is all woo-woo. But we must remember not to feel unworthy. We are worthy to see, hear and feel the divine source and develop our spirit and our soul and go forth. And it reminded me of how Gurdjieff discusses a lot about the suffering of his endlessness, the suffering of God, which brings me back round to Christ. Christ accepts all, but many deny Christ. That's a suffering in many ways, suffering for Christ, that he has to accept people that put him down, slate him, did not believe in him, but he's got such a big heart, and obviously forgiveness, which is a major part of his repertoire. But this is also the same for the divine source, and I wonder if this is where Gurdjieff is coming from when he discusses his endlessnesses, suffering, his endlessnesses, continuing suffering that we create. Is that because the divine source accepts all of us, but many of us deny the divine source? And I'm pretty sure if you're watching my channel, you're on the path of, you believe in the divine source and you're working towards it, and what we're trying to do is not disappoint the divine source, but I do feel strongly that once you're on a soul spiritual path and you understand your conscience and the morality of life, you know that when you're doing wrong, you know when you're doing right. And we are trying to not appease, the divine source. We might try and appease demons and demonics, but we're trying to continue working on the right path. We are using heart thinking, comfort, understanding. We need to understand ourselves, because there's much helplessness out there, and to parry the helplessness we have to cultivate ourselves. We have to create ourselves, cultivate the I within us, even cultivate the not, as I was reminded the other day. Not I, but Christ in me. We need to understand that we don't want the many different I's that are part of us, because we're a different I on different occasions. I wanted to read some Steiner, Rudolf Steiner, and this is from Egyptian Myths and Mysteries. Quote, "Thus 2 types of forces influence the earth, the sun forces and the moon forces, the one stimulating and the other mummifying. Let us imagine that a giant steals the sun away. In that moment we would all become stiff like mummies, so stiff that we would never again be able to lose this form. But if the giant took the moon away, all the beautiful measured movements that we have today would become convulsive. We would become inwardly entirely mobile. We would see our hands prolong themselves to the gigantic and then shrink up again. The power of metamorphosis would be vastly intensified. Now, however, man is inserted between these 2 forces." End quote. So we've got these 2 forces working upon us, which is maybe why people feel quite torn. I've spoken to many people who discuss about how they can't seem to centre themselves. There seems to be 2 people inside them, pulling them one side or pushing them another way. And I wonder if that is the sun and the moon forces within them, or them being influenced by the sun and the moon forces from outside into them. And I've been trying to struggle in making videos of how we're supposed to be becoming sun forces, solar forces. This is something that I've got from the Gurdjieff work. And I think Steiner is talking about the same thing, because Steiner says that Christ was originally in the sun, and that every planet has an entity in it, or a being in it, or there's lords and that lord over it. And Christ was the one that was in the sun originally, and he came down to this earth, did his 3 years in Jesus of Nazareth, and then was, as we all know, crucified on the cross, resurrected, and then resurrected. But Christ consciousness then went into the earth, and this earth is transforming to become a sun. And from the Gurdjieff work, I believe that he's teaching us how to become the sun within ourselves, the solar being the bright, glaring sun that we want to be, rather than a darkened moon. And I understand, yeah, we need the moon, and I've done a lot of different works with the moon in my past, and I understand how it's part of our dream world, it's part of gravity, it's got a big influence upon us. But I also feel it's not the, how am I trying to say this? Maybe we step on the moon to get to the sun. We have to remember that the moon is reflected sunlight when it's got light in it that we can see when we look up, and obviously when it's no moon, dark moon, there is no sunlight falling upon it. And I'll just go back to Steiner a moment, where he discusses about the sun and the moon influences on us, and he's talking about humans in the earlier epochs. Had the earth remained exposed to the sun alone, the mobility of the human form would have been enhanced to the highest degree. The earth would have attained a tempo impossible for man, and man would never have been able to develop his present form. On the other hand, if only the moon forces had been influential, man would have rigidified immediately. His form would have been frozen at the moment of birth. He would have become a mummy. Today man evolves between these 2 extremes, between unlimited mobility and complete rigidity. Because the forming forces are in the moon, the physical moon has become slag. Only the exalted and powerful beings who are connected with the moon can can extend their influence into these forms. And I'm going to quickly add here, because people didn't go, slag? What, she's a slag? Slag is as in the term used for broken up earth and stone and such like. And we've got to remember how the trinity of the sun, the moon and the earth, they're all working together, and we, as we're developing ourselves as a microcosm to be a part of the macrocosm, we also need to be involved in that trinity of working with the sun, the moon and the earth. And I was saying about Christ in the sun, and there's other lords in the sun. Steiner reminds us, quote, "In every sunbeam there streams down on all the inhabitants of the earth the force of those higher beings who live on the sun, and in the light of the sun there descends the force of love, which here on earth streams from man to man, from heart to heart. The sun can never send mere physical light to earth. The warmest, most ardent feeling of love is invisibly present in the sunlight. With the sunlight there stream to earth the forces of the thrones, the cherubim, the seraphim, and the whole hierarchy of higher beings who inhabit the sun, and have no need of any body other than the light. But since all this that is present in the sun today was at that time, talking about the past, still united with the earth, those higher beings themselves were also united with the earth. Even today they are connected with earth evolution. And every hierarchy is helping in, whether it's earth evolution or sun evolution, cosmos evolution, because I think the divine source is a continuing process. It's continually evolving, and we're part of that evolution, and we want to help the divine source to evolve in the best way possible, not hold it back with our dark negative ways. We want to try and be as pure light and love as we possibly can, have that cosmic energy in us. And I know there's people that's going to say to me, oh, but life is so difficult. I find life difficult as well. I have to struggle through, making the money to pay the bills and such like. Though something I have done in my life, definitely in the last few years, or even longer than that actually, I've realised that I can simplify my life. I wanted too much, not necessarily materialistically, and I struggled a lot to try and have the kind of life that I wanted, because I felt that was the kind of life I should be living. Like everybody else, get that house, get that car, get that top job. And I was unhappy. And I know it sounds easy for me to say, oh, I slimmed everything down, I cut my bills, I moved to smaller housing and such like. And I was doing that in I think it was sort of 2013, 2014 onwards. But I didn't just cut down the way I materialistically lived. I also cut down the things that would distract me from doing my soul work, my spiritual work. I cut out from my life people and things that were a hazard to me in my spiritual development. And I know someone's going to say, or some of you are going to say, well, Gurdjieff says we need that to go up against. Yes, we do. But we also at sometimes have to let certain things go that are definitely holding us back, or are a repetitive pattern that is not improving or teaching you. If it's a repetitive pattern that's staying the same, you go out and expect the same thing to happen, that's not one of those issues in which you're struggling against that's helping you develop yourself. That's just following a mechanical process. Sometimes things, the dross has to be cut away, so that then new things can come in. New light, sun-filled things, friends, life can come in. We have to, I want to say, we're trying not to be mechanical, so we want to experiment with new things, but we must make sure they're things that encourage us and help us in our way forward. I don't put obstacles in my way just because Gurdjieff says, oh, you need to come up against obstacles to test yourself or whatever. There's enough obstacles that come into my life just through accident and them kind of laws. I'm working towards being part of the cosmos. I want to be a part of the divine source's ongoing evolutionary cosmos. I don't want to be the one that's holding it back. And I'm quite concerned that there is not enough evolution going on, and there's too much staying in the doom and gloom. I love the term doom scrolling. People are still doom scrolling and sending me stuff about doom and gloom. Well, it's good to be forewarned, but at the same time, we need to find a way to get people to look at them, the better things, the lighter things, the good stuff that people are doing. There are good people out there. There are ways of taking yourself out of that doom and gloom system so that you can live a more fulfilled life. Which is important, to be fulfilled, rather than looking for the next doom and gloom story to worry about or pass on quickly to somebody else to say, look what's going to happen. And that reminds me of the thought forms of, if we think it's going to happen, it will happen. So we need to turn our thought forms round, as Steiner and I believe Gurdjieff was instructing us to do. We think in a positive way. We think spiritually. We act spiritually. We love spiritually. And I'm not talking like as in The Secret, if you put forward that dream idea, it will come to you, because that doesn't always work, and definitely not in a materialistic way. Or sometimes it works for people that maybe have to learn a lesson from it. But I do think from a soul development, continuing your connection to the divine source, it does work. If you put out that I need the connection to the divine hears and will send help down to you. It's a little bit of a ramble I went on then. I was going to talk about something else, but I just went off on one, and then I found these Steiner quotes. But I hope you enjoyed this talk, and maybe it was inspiring enough for you to continue your work, because that's what I want to do, is to help inspire people to stay on the right path and to remind them not to sidestep into the conspiracies too much or fall down too many rabbit holes. Find your way to your divine source. May you walk with your angels, archangels, and as Dave Allen said, may your God walk with you. May you walk with your God. Love and peace to one and all. Oh, and one love. One love. It's the way. This is the way.